to the last and final session of the Festival of Resisting Borders, fighting hostile environment in the university and beyond. Someone in the back just put their hand up like they're really excited. This panel session is of course entitled No Borders, No White Supremacy, for an obvious reason. Before I begin with the actual panel discussion, I just want to let everyone know about the setup. So basically, I'm going to do some introductions now, and afterwards we'll have everyone on the panel introduce themselves and do a brief biography of themselves and their activism and what they've done. And then we'll go into a list of questions that we've prepared. And then finally, after we're finished with that, we leave it to the audience, here today, and then we'll have a Q&A discussion with those on the panel. Is everyone okay with that? Yep. Great. Before I enter into the whole discussion itself and the questions, which are quite multifaceted in a way, I want to say an enormous thank you to everyone on the Coalition Against Borders team. You have been phenomenal. That's Dimitri and everyone from SOAS, Justice for Workers, Lex and Shadin from SOAS DTD Support, the SOAS SU, in particular, Halimo, Mehdi, and Nisha, of course, Dimitri as well, Simona from Demilitarized Kings, and Aaron from Docs Not Cops. Every one of these groups have really worked together. We've all been conversing since March of this year to have this event, and at many stages we were quite, well, we didn't know if it was going to happen or not. Things were kind of all over the place, and then finally it just started to come to place. And I think this event is a testament to your continued support and just enormous level of energy you've put into making sure that people understand what hostile environment is and how we can oppose hostile environment, and just basically the structurally racist policies that have been happening for many, many years, not just now with the Tories, but just everything that's been happening, and how do we work together to oppose these structurally racist, xenophobic regimes. And I think that we've really accomplished a lot in the last 2 days, and so thank you. I also want to thank the volunteers who've come out. They've been such amazing individuals coming out, giving their time. I know it's the first week of term and everyone's quite exhausted because you've just survived Freshers Week, but thank you so much to the volunteers who have supported the Coalition Against Borders, and you've all been amazing as well. And a particular thank you to Dr. Molly Gridell from the University of Manchester, who paid for half of our food. So thank you again. It is Black History Month, and I felt like to end this festival, we need to tie together why we are so opposed to hostile environment and the bordering regimes. And we can't talk about it without talking about race, especially anti-Black racism, Islamophobia, and the general xenophobic and heightened xenophobic that's been happening in the last few years. In particular, and I think this is a good time to have these discussions, these sort of a wrap up to why the Festival of Resisting Borders came about. So I think now I will go into introducing the panel itself. We have a very incredible panel of seasoned activists and people that have campaigned so brilliantly. And so I'm very honored to have with me, and I think we'll just give you the mic to Nirmala from South Asia Solidarity Group, and you can explain what South Asia Solidarity Group is about.
Okay. South Asia Solidarity Group, I don't have to speak loud. We campaign in solidarity with left struggles, left movements, social movements linked to gender issues, caste, class issues in the whole of the subcontinent. We see the subcontinent as a one regional whole and see how they impact on each other, the experience of colonialism and the subsequent, post-independence developments in South Asia as a whole, with India as a supremacist power. I am myself from Sri Lanka. I am a Tamil Sri Lankan who came to this country about nearly 30 years ago as a political refugee, and have been involved with South. I mean, it was set up. We were set up around that the time of my arrival here, and I have been active with South Asia Solidarity Group. So we have done a lot of work on Sri Lanka and India, and some work on Pakistan and Bangladesh, and of course Kashmir, etc., etc. And what else shall I say? Okay, I have also been, a legal representative for asylum seekers and migrants for the last 22 years, working with organizations like the JC. The bulk of my experience has been at the JCWI, the Immigration Advisory Service, and so organizations like that. So that's another thing that I have been doing, and I've been involved in my. Lately, I've been a bit slow on the migrant campaigns because I'm so involved with the Sri Lanka campaign, the Tamil community campaign is here, and also with South Asia Solidarity Group. So that, anyway, so that's my background.
Okay. Yeah, my name is Minka Adolfo. I'm a black community activist that goes back over 35 years. I can't think of any campaign that I've not been involved with in regards to our community. Whether it's police violence, whether it is excluding our children from the schools, whether it's our mass incarceration, I've been involved. I come here primarily today to speak from the United Friends and Families campaign. But prior to the campaign, I was involved within the Joy Gardner campaign. This goes back now to 20 years. Joy Gardner was a black woman who was appealing against a deportation order, which is in her rights, according to this society. She was appealing. However, the police and the immigration officials decided they wanted to pay a visit to my sister and broke down her door and then proceeded to put up to 13 feet of tape around her mouth, causing her to suffocate and die. This was in the presence of her young son Graham, who have been traumatized, but I can say to the gathering here that he's been progressing well. And what's been interesting in my journey in campaigning over all of these years, what I'm seeing is the children of the victims of these vicious state killings and attacks, they themselves are increasingly getting involved within the struggle. As a result of such a killing, and as a result of many other killings around that time, we felt it was important to pull the families together in what we call the United Families and Friends campaign. And this campaign was a campaign to give support, collective support to the families, because there's a narrative that the police and the state media usually use when they kill us. They demonize us, the most strongest, the most wickedest people. That's why they had to use such excessive force. We felt that it was important that the family going through their individual experience had to talk with each other and give each other that kind of moral support. And we were grateful to get support from organizations like Inquest, who's to make sure that they get the best legal representation, and also in many cases get best pathologists to look at their case. And within the campaign, we look at the killings of people by the police, those that are in the psychiatric hospitals, those in the prisons and the immigrations and detention centers. This is the 20th year of our formation, and whilst I'm in a place of so-called learning, it's important to me when I come to these gatherings or when I go to meetings in general that we just don't look at it as a talk shop. It really is about what are we going to do to change the situation. So I want to just put one day out there for you. If I get a chance, so I'll keep on saying it. As a campaign, for every year since the last 20 years, we've had an annual remembrance procession that leaves from Trafalgar Square, and we go down to Downing Street and we hand in a letter of protest. And it's not so much a demonstration, but it's a remembrance. Because what we're saying when we come out on that day is that those people meant something to us. Their lives mattered. And so we want to call upon everybody that's here and put it in your network. The day is the last Saturday in October. We meet at 12 o'clock at Trafalgar Square, and we walk down to Downing Street. We didn't go to no police station, we're not going to no hospital, we're going to Downing Street, because that's where we think the source of the problem is. So I just really hope that after hearing what everybody is hearing, at a very minimum, you give us some support, because the families really need it. And the more people look the other way, the more we're going to see these deaths continue. Thank you.
Okay, so it's working. Greetings, my name is Isis. Isis Amlak, if you want my surname. So, I'm here to talk primarily as a resident of North Kensington. I live about 10 minutes walk from the site of now, it's become world known, the Grenfell Tower fire. I've lived in where I live for about 23 years, and I've lived in the actual area for 25 years. I find it interesting seeing the words fighting hostile environments, because I'm trying to think about my experience in this country. So I'm a migrant, I'm an African, and I just put the context. I don't tend to use the word black. I'm a Pan-Africanist, I use African. So when you hear me saying African with a K, I'm referring to what some people would say as black. So I am an African born in Trinidad and Tobago, a former colonized country, and I came here as a forced migrant at the age of 11, 40 years ago. And to be honest, I think the words hostile environment were really what I experienced as an 11-year-old migrant coming to a very racist, extremely racist England as it was then, and we could argue it still is now, although it might take a different form. It's not so blatant. My involvement in activism, I did a few CND marches and that sort of thing when I was 16, but I really got involved and became really politically active in about 1986, 87 as an anti-apartheid activist. At the time, apartheid was a legal system in Azania, or some people will call South Africa, and I and many other people were involved in it. I was part of a group of predominantly young people called the City of London Anti-Apartheid Group, and this group made a commitment to hold a non-stop picket 24 hours, 24/7 outside the South African embassy until Mandela was released, which indeed we did do. So I was part of that movement, and I think that's really where my politics really came. We had a lot of fights, and we saw a lot of things. I was involved in supporting anti-racist campaigns, again, a lot of the Tamil Tiger support campaigns. I've gone on as I've got older. I suppose the most recent thing, I'm actually a member of the Global African Congress, and I think that's really important to state. I am primarily, as I say, a Pan-Africanist. My politics are about race first, and my primary political agenda is reparatory justice for the enslavement of Africans. I'm a member of a number of international Pan-African groups as well. However, most recently, I think, prior to what's happened in my local area with Grenfell, I was most closely associated with Mark Duggan's campaign. Mark Duggan, who was murdered brutally by police in 2011, which led to the uprising in Tottenham. And I've also been, prior to Mark Duggan's campaign, also a supporter of the organisation United Friends and Families that Minka's mentioned. And I think that's probably all you need to know for now. I'm really here as an individual, not as an organisation in terms of Grenfell, but to talk really about what's happening on the ground there and my experience in the North Kensington area, because I think it's really important that people understand the history of North Kensington or what it represents, because if one were to go to many parts of Kensington and Chelsea, the so-called Royal Borough, you would assume it's a place of great wealth, which is. And what you might take away is not what's really there. The real history is to be found, actually, interestingly, within a few minutes walking distance of the Grenfell Tower. Grenfell Tower is very symbolic, and it's been a very, very serious blow to us in this area, to our community. And we mustn't forget that the majority of people that died in that tower, and it's hundreds of people, it's not 80-something people, were people from migrant backgrounds, they were people of colour, they were working class people. There were very few wealthy people and leaseholders in that tower, so don't be fooled. It really was what I call institutional terror, and it really is an attack on working people and on migrant people and on people of colour. So we'll get to talk about that in a little bit. Thank you.
Buenas tardes. Es un placer para mí dirigirme a ustedes y hacer parte de este selecto grupo de personas que componen este panel.
Good afternoon. I just want to say that I'm really grateful to be partaking in this experience and to be in a panel with such distinguished individuals.
Y sea lo primero manifestar quién es Luis Carlos. Luis Carlos Valencia es un hombre que nació en Colombia, estudié en Colombia, hice mi universidad en Colombia, pero por razones de la lucha sindical y la lucha política, un día me tocó que salir de Colombia porque las circunstancias eran totalmente adversas para seguir en Colombia, y he llegado aquí a este país.
Firstly, I want to talk about Luis Carlos. He's referring to himself. He was born in Colombia and he was educated in Colombia, but because of different adversities, he had to leave Colombia because different political and a lot of union problems that he had to migrate from Colombia to come here to England.
Solicité asilo político en este país. Afortunadamente conté con la fortuna de poder obtener dicho asilo político, y con el lazo de tiempo he sido garantizado con la nacionalidad británica. Llegué a SOAS en el año 2005. Empecé a trabajar como cleaner en SOAS con una compañía Mighty. Posteriormente, a los 3 meses de estar trabajando con ellos, se hizo un cambio de compañía e ingresó Ocean. Las condiciones laborales que teníamos en ese entonces eran muy precarias. Teníamos unas condiciones laborales que no teníamos derecho a sick pay, nuestros holidays eran muy escasos, y además de eso éramos víctimas de los malos tratos por parte de las personas que tenían la posibilidad de dirigir estas empresas.
So when he left Colombia, he had to appeal for political asylum, and thankfully he was granted this. And he also mentions his privilege that he was given British nationality. So in 2005 he joined SOAS under the administration of a company called ASEAN, and he came as a cleaner. But then that soon changed, and then another company took over called Ocean, in which all the workers were subjected to a precarious environment. They had no sick pay, they had no London living wage, and they had to, on a daily, experience a lot of abuse by people in positions of power that were meant to be taking care of them.
Pero como siempre he dicho y repito una frase que alguien dijo en alguna oportunidad: cuando la tiranía se hace ley, la rebelión es un derecho. Y en ese contexto empezamos a trabajar en la formación de lo que hoy se conoce como Justice for Workers. Empezamos a trabajar en la lucha sindical tratando de reivindicar nuestros derechos.
But as he always says, when tyranny becomes law, the rebellion is a right. So then at that point, they started to organize and try to campaign to better the situation the workers had to experience in SOAS.
En todo este tiempo de la lucha, contamos con la ayuda incondicional de los estudiantes, quienes, repito, son la luz en nuestro camino, porque a través de ellos y con ellos hemos logrado vencer y obtener algunos beneficios que nos merecemos por derecho propio.
And all this time, during the struggle, the workers counted with the unconditional support of the students. He says that they are the light of this campaign because and then in this manner, like as a community, they all fought for the rights that were theirs. This is their right to be treated as human beings and to have dignity and respect.
No quiero extenderme más, pero quiero manifestar de que ha sido una lucha difícil, pero también ha sido una lucha con beneficios. Y ha sido una lucha denodada por la reivindicación de nuestros derechos. Nos comprometimos con la terminación de la tercerización a SOAS. Nos comprometimos a terminar la infame contratación terciarizada en SOAS. Afortunadamente, SOAS Management ha entendido que el mejor camino para el entendimiento y para reivindicar algunos derechos conculcados a nosotros los trabajadores es terminar con las empresas terciarizadas en SOAS y contratarnos directamente. Esa es una lucha librada por todos y que hemos logrado tener, y en este momento podemos decir que a partir del próximo año, en septiembre, todos los trabajadores terciarizados de SOAS estaremos directamente contratados por la universidad.
He wants to highlight that even though this has been a very difficult struggle, it's been one that has paid off, because just as they compromised from the beginning that they will end outsourcing in SOAS, they have finally achieved that. Because now, finally, SOAS management has seen that the only way forward for them to be the institution that they promised that they are is to completely finish outsourcing in SOAS. And then from now on, in next September, no workers at SOAS will be outsourced. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Daniel, and I come from Kenya. I'm a migrant in this country, and I'm an ex-asylum seeker, because we go on the process until we get neutralized and become a British citizen. I'm here tonight because I've been involved with the Justice for LSE cleanup, and it was a big fight, and we fought it, and we succeeded, and it's because we are very determined to achieve what we wanted to achieve. And this is because we've been exploited for a long time, and we came together and get ourselves to join union, and then from there they decided the union give us some support, and also the student from LSE, they give us a lot of support. And what I want to talk tonight, or what I want to say tonight, is unity is very important at our workplace, because if people can get organized and think what they want to achieve, then they can push everything together, and they can fight, and they can be successful. Because if you look at the cleaners at LSE, and LSE itself with the management and all that, it's a big university. And what we didn't like is not because we are outsourced, we did not like what we've been treated by the the company which was contracted to give us the work in LSE. So the big fight was for dignity and equality. And after that, everything flew up, and finally, LSE decided to take us in-house, and everybody is very pleased, because if I give an example of the life for a cleaner, as myself now, you have to work long hours to get to maintain yourself, to live in London, and accommodation, food, and things like that. And also, if you're a migrant in this country, you also have some other people behind you, the country you come from. Sometimes they need support. Many countries, like in Africa, where I come from, Kenya, we don't have anything like social security. So if my elderly mom gets sick, it's nobody to look after her. It's our family, it's myself or my brothers or my sisters. All those things they have to do for themselves. If they get sick, they have to pay everything for themselves. So it's very, very hard life we do get here. And so when we see people exploiting us, it's something we don't feel very comfortable with, because we need to have our dignity and our respect at a place of work. So when working as a cleaner, as I said, long hours, I start from 6 a.m. and at 6 p.m. Majority of the cleaners, they do long hours as I do, because you not know many things to do, and because you can't do many activity or go to social life or things like that. So you need to get to do all the things you need to do to maintain yourself and your family and things like that. So it's good thing for fighting for your rights, and it's good thing to be powerful and to have confidence to know things are going to benefit, because when we come in-house next year, LSE cleaners will be equally treated as academic staff or the professors who have been working there, with all benefits they've been getting. So my working condition will improve from working from 6 a.m. to 6 p.m. I'll be allowed only to work 8 hours a day without reducing my pay. And that thing is very, very important, and it is very good thing to have happened to us and to the campaigners and activities. And thank you very much.
Thank you everyone. I want to start off actually speaking about Grenfell, because when the entire world saw the tragedy of Grenfell unfold, where over 100 people, many of whom perished in the blaze, were both documented and undocumented migrants, particularly working class Black, Muslim, and people of color. Grenfell isn't just a testament to the horrors of rampant gentrification, the social cleansing of working class Black and people of color communities, the abuse and criminal negligence from the Royal Borough of Kensington and Chelsea, but also the woeful precarity that many migrants, both documented and undocumented, face in the UK under hostile environment. Many of those who have become displaced, even after the 100 days since the fire, still remain homeless, are those who are, of course, undocumented migrants, terrified of being detained and deported out of the UK. In the aftermath of Grenfell, the government provided an immigration amnesty of 12 months. However, campaigners have noted that this amnesty is completely meaningless, as many of the undocumented migrants who lived in Grenfell are rightly fearful that to disclose their situation to the Home Office will no doubt lead to them being detained and deported out of this country once the amnesty is over. As we have seen here at SOAS in June of 2009, where management colluded with the Home Office in a surprise immigration raid that happened inside this institution that detained and deported 9 migrant cleaners, central to the SOAS Justice for Cleaners campaign, which is now SOAS Justice for Workers. The immigration raids and detentions and deportations are a convenient way in which the state gets rid of migrants fighting against exploitation and seeking justice. So I'm going to give this question to the rest of the panel, but I will specifically ask Isis, Luis Carlos, and Nirmala to comment on this, and Daniel as well. How can we support undocumented migrants of Grenfell and those who are fighting against worker exploitation and against state and corporate violence in the context of the current regime we live in? Thank you. We'll go with you first, yeah.
Okay, so, yeah, I think you've outlined a lot of the key issues. It's a very difficult situation because on the ground, anecdotally, we know that many, many more people died in that tower than has been officially recorded. We know from firemen that, you know, there were, in certain rooms there were like 20 bodies, and, you know, the people, the survivors, were tripping over the bodies of the dead. Now, one of the issues is that if someone was undocumented living in that building, there is a good possibility that they may never be identified, because the temperatures rose to such degrees that, I mean, I look out my window, my kitchen window, and I can see Grenfell looking at me, and it's you know, it's a mausoleum. The people's remains remain in there. Now, one of the things that we were saying from day one is that we have to fight to ensure that those people that live there never become ghosts, forgotten people, because they were people and they have a right to a memory. And that's a really important thing. One of the things that we need, and there is a campaign called Justice for Grenfell. Unfortunately, they couldn't be here, but I mean, you can look them up and you'll see that they exist, and you can give support in many ways. But one of the things that we need is we need questions to be continually put. We need pressure continually put on the government to ensure that every possible, conceivable forensic exercise is carried out to identify the bodies of the people who died in there, and to give us the true numbers. We don't accept 86, it's absolutely ridiculous. It's absolutely ridiculous, and it's insulting to the memory of those people. So that's on the dead. Now, this whole thing about the amnesty, as Sana has correctly pointed out, is bullshit. How are people going to seriously come forward? I mean, there's even an issue about this farce of a public inquiry, which we have no confidence in. This public inquiry will come to nothing, and we know, Minka and many of us who've also worked and supported people. I mean, you've worked with the Hillsborough campaign. Look how many years it took for that. And we know that this public inquiry is a farce. The terms of reference are wrong. I mean, we stood up in chambers and shouted at this joke of a judge. I mean, we ourselves actually need to have our own public inquiry, our own people's inquiry into what happened. That's for a start. So we mustn't validate the public inquiry. However, if people were to come forward and wanted to have standing and actually to give testimony to the inquiry, they would have to be confident, if they were undocumented people, that at the end of the 12-month period, as Sana said, that they're not going to be deported. And we know this government. We know what we're facing, and we know that people would be deported. We've also actually, I was in the chamber at RBKC, because there's a monthly meeting that council have, and I would invite people who are interested to come along to these monthly meetings. Keep an eye on this awful conservative borough council that we have. But the leader of the council, Dizzy Lizzie Campbell as we call her, because she's an actually clueless woman from the south of the borough, extremely wealthy, with her 4 sons in boarding school, who'd never actually set foot in a tower block in her life, in a council tower block. This is the sort of person that they replaced. I mean, I could go on forever, but awful, awful local authority. I mean, they are horrendous. They really create a hostile environment. Anyway, she was asked last week, had she had a response from the government, from the Home Office, as to this extension, because we were asking, we're saying, an amnesty cannot be time-bound. We want an amnesty, full stop. And she gave this ridiculous answer. Oh, I can't remember if they've been in touch. So the other thing, besides calling and demanding that we do everything that is humanly and scientifically possible to identify the true number of people who died in that blaze, that we call it what it is, institutional terror, institutional murder. It's not just a fire. And that we demand amnesty. Full stop for anyone who was undocumented. In fact, we don't even accept that people are undocumented. People are legal regardless of this idea of immigration status. It's irrelevant. People were humans before this, and this is a human rights issue as well. And I think that as time goes forward, there's a lot of trauma in the area, there's a lot of confusion. We were invaded by the Red Cross, much like Haiti and many other, people are now normalizing that as much as it can be, and they are getting together. Also, we need to respect the fact that those communities who were affected, the Moroccan community, the Sudanese community, the Eritrean community, the Ethiopian community, West African communities, the working class communities that lived in that area have got their support structures. They've got groups that they trust and people and organizations they've worked with. And as much as possible, we need to be careful not to think that we're going to parachute in a bunch of people to tell people what to do. Actually, what we need is people to be there to support the people on the ground, to go to those communities, those migrant communities, and ask them what they want. How can we support you? Recognize that they have the skills and the expertise. So that's what I'll say for now. And I'm sure there's going to be a lot more. I think we need a people's inquiry. So let's see, watch this space.
Nirmala, would I just say a few words?
I put on my sort of immigration lawyer hat here, and I just realized that Minka looked very familiar. And when he started talking about Joy Gardner, many years ago, I mean, I was at JCWI at the time, and JCWI also did a lot of publicity about the Joy Gardner horrific death. And then myself and another activist from South Asia Solidarity Group got involved, and we did a People's Tribunal, where Ian MacDonald, QC, Jeremy Corbyn was there, and lots of lawyers, but community groups. And you know, the whole hall broke down in tears. I mean, I remember all of us tearing, even I think Ian MacDonald QC, when Joy Gardner's mother got up and spoke. It was just so moving, and we then published the proceedings of the People's Tribunal about deportations and deaths of detainees, Immigration Act detainees, and the horrific way in which the Home Office deals with people, so-called illegal, overstaying people, right? Anyway, that's history. I don't remember which year that was. Quite some years ago. Anyway, so having said that, I totally agree with ISIS that we should not parachute in. And the fact that, you know, after this horrific tragedy, that the Home Office has the gumption to say it's a 12-month amnesty. It's ridiculous. That it's a 12-time limited one, and you know, they haven't said, you know, we will look at the cases, and because I'm sure there are lots of cases where if people have been here for a very long time, they have had children, and the children have been in local schools, even within the very restrictive immigration rules and laws at the moment, there will be room for them to exercise their discretion and grant these people, you know, permanent stay in this country. And of course they are not going to do that. And I just want to say very quickly, the current immigration system, there are two systems. One is the system for EEA migrants, which we are going to lose after Brexit, the free movement system. And the other one is for the non-EEA people, mainline it's just got rid of. And so people can come here for legal migration only to join family members. Mainly that's the only opportunity now. If you want to either family life or you can come here as visitors or students, or to join family members, to get married, your parents, your children, that's it. And that has also become extremely restrictive because they have imposed all kinds of restrictions on it. The other terrifying thing is the constant criminalizing of minor immigration law infractions. If you have overstayed for 2 months, 3 months, if you have been, and they will remember it, the memory is immense, and you may have gone through the loops, and you may have come to eventually, you know, you may have even regularized your stay, and then you go to apply for British nationality, and they will come back and say, oh, in 2006, for 3 months, you did not have valid leave. And during that time, how did you survive? And this immigrant will very innocently say, oh, I did work and tried to survive. Ah, you have committed a criminal offense by working illegally those 3 months, and therefore you are denied British nationality because you are not of good character. So this is the level to which the immigration system has started to criminalize migrants. And of course, they say skills shortage, but one of the problems is that skills shortage, but they don't have this, they don't have the necessary labor, because you will find there is a crack in the consensus on immigration, between even the neoliberal business class, because they do want the cheap labor, because they can have the cheap labor here. They don't mind if people are illegal, because it is the precariat basically. You can hire and fire 0 hours contracts or no contracts. They want that. But then there is, of course, the right-wing fascist development of British nationalism, which doesn't want people here from the global south. As far as Grenfell is concerned, I have lots of different ideas of what I would do if I met an undocumented migrant. And I personally think that the communities there could call upon the services of people who have worked in the immigration field to come and give ideas to use the crack in this consensus, crack within the consensus, within the establishment about immigration, and also look at the loopholes simultaneously within the law. And then when you make a political demand, it becomes very powerful. You pack that political demand for not this time-limited amnesty, but for permanent stay here for these people. But use the law as well as the political consensus being opened up now. We must hammer at that. Sometimes that's the only way we can push forward. Because over the years, even the previous Labour government really joined the Tories, and they moved really rightward as far as building a consensus on immigration was concerned. They moved really to the right. So that's why it's so difficult for us to break through.
Thank you. If Luis Carlos and Daniel like to say something with regards to worker exploitation to the latter part of the question. I'm sorry? Okay, you can say something.
Yeah. With the Grenfell what needed here is if people on the ground and if people could be given information to be aware what they are entitled to, because a lot of these people undocumented migrants, they might be fearful, especially people from different parts of the world where they come from. Example, if I give from Africa, the police there, they are very brutality, they kick you, they beat you, and these people, they are in fear like that as well. So what needed is for them to explain things to them, to be aware what they need to do, and also people to talk to these people and give them information and find out what they need and what can be given to them as an assistant. And I think that is more important.
Thank you. And Minka would like to say a few words about Grenfell.
Yeah, I totally agree with the demands that's been put forward by my sister Isis in regards to full unconditional amnesty. She talks about also independent inquiry. And I think sometimes as we at this gathering here looking at the festival of resistance, for those people that's not really been involved for too long, there's a tendency to kind of think that, well, there is no point of really struggling and bring about change. And I think it's always important to have an historical perspective in regards to our resistance. And from the black community, and you could also say this also impacted on other non-stroke British workers in these countries. If you go back to the 60s, we had a situation in which that black people in regards to housing was confronted with the reality of no blacks, no dogs, as they mentioned, even no Irish. You go fast forward to, as a result of resistance, that changed. So we come up to the 80s now, in which we had one of the most devastating fire on mainland Britain, which was the New Cross massacre, in which 13 young black people were killed in a racist fire. Despite all of what they want to try and put their spin on it, it was a racist fire. And for those of us that was involved in the organizing, who done our own investigation, we will talk about the incendiary device in the garden. We will talk about the white man seen with a throwing motion to the house. We will talk about where the fire started. Because of the net curtains, it started actually right near the window, as opposed to what the police got involved and tried to suggest it originated from a fight in the party. It's important to look at how our community responded to that, because we did not rely upon the system. And so that was in January 1981. In March in 1981, the black community mobilized. And we mobilized over 25,000 people, marching from New Cross to central London, putting our demands firmly on the agenda. In April of 1981, still not satisfied, we had a Brixton uprising and turned into the national uprisings. Again, putting exceedingly great pressure upon the system. As a result of that, and I think it's important we learn these lessons, the state responded. And the state responded by creating their race relation industry, co-opting, obviously, people within the system, and also a lot of people getting involved with the Labour Party as some kind of solution to our problems. And what I'm saying, from those experiences, what we'll see is a degeneration within our resistance. And it's important for us to know and learn these lessons. And I'm saying the lesson is that if we're going to seriously respond, if we're going to deal with the demands from Grenfell, then we have to recognize that that is only going to be successful for our own independent mobilization. Putting out demands is one thing. Our own independent mobilization, and to be very clear, that the Labour Party should not, in no circumstances, be given any kind of leadership position within our movement, because we need to understand we're talking about the state. And the state is not just the Tories. The state is those political representatives and their backers. So I just want us to be clear that where we're here now, we have made progress over the years, but I don't want us to see us making the kind of mistakes we made in the past.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I want to go now, and I think I'll be coming to you, Inka. In July of this year, a young black father by the name of Edson de Costa died while in police custody. Edson joined the more than 1,500 deaths in police custody in the UK since 1993 that include a high percentage of black and people of color lives. As Marcia Riggs, also from United Families and Friends campaign, has stated, quote, "Not only are black people killed by the police, they are targets of police stop and searches. They are 17 times more likely to be searched on suspicion of carrying illegal drugs, weapons, or stolen property than their white counterparts," end quote. In this heightened level of counterterrorism in the UK, migrant communities of color, particularly Muslims, are feeling the full effects of state-sanctioned surveillance from PREVENT and UK and visa immigration surveillance. Likewise, as we saw in the aftermath of 7/7 in July of 2005, where Brazilian migrant Jean-Charles Jimenez was gunned down by the London Metropolitan Police, having been mistaken by the police for a suspected suicide bomber. Working class, migrant, black, and people of color are also victimized routinely by police brutality and violence. I want to give this question primarily to Minka, but also to Isis and to everyone else in the panel. What is one thing that young and new activists can learn from the campaigns of that, like Christopher Adler, Sean Riggs, and Sarah Reid? Thank you.
Well, like my brother said earlier on, the one thing we can learn, the one main thing it seems to me that we can learn, is the importance of our unity. I started off by speaking about black deaths in custody, and in fact, when our campaign started, it primarily focused on black deaths in custody, and quite rightly so. Because the amount of killings that was taking place is like we were going out of season with these damn beasts they call the police. And so we started organizing, but it wasn't long when you get involved within struggle that you recognize that there's also other people involved in struggle. And it just makes sense for us to build those bridges, build those connections. And so as a result of that, whilst it is true that the majority of people that is killed in custody is white, the disproportionate amount of them are actually black people. And so our campaign represents both black and white people. And so the importance of unity cannot be stressed enough. But another important point, although you only asked for one.
There's many. I know there's many.
Another important point that's got to be stressed is that you go out on all of these demonstrations, and one of the demands you always hear is that, what do you want? We want justice. Are you gonna get it? Fight for it. When do you want it? Now. Yeah. But what we've got to really define is really, what is this justice? What is this justice that what we're talking about? And so one thing we've got to learn, it seems to me, if justice means anything, it means changing this political capitalist system. If justice means anything, it means that. Because when you go out there and you're being killed by the police, it looks like the police and they're pretty wicked, and indeed they are. But you've got a whole state machinery that comes into place to back them up. And so it seems to me we've got to be clear, what is it that what we're up against? Because as a black community, it's important when we look at deaths in custody not to lose sight of the reality of what's going on. And I think sometimes a lot of people outside of the black community, and I think even people within the black community, don't really seem to recognize the kind of silent genocide, which I call it. I don't care where anybody want to get upset with me. That's going on. You know, we have a situation in which we have something like in many of our schools, 60–70% of the people that are being excluded are African people, young black men, black boys. We have what we've got now is like a pipeline, what they call from school to prisons, in which the Lamy report just came out the other day and talked about up to 45% of our young men in these youth offenders being young black men. We don't represent more than about 3–4% of the population. There's more of our black men in actually prison than in higher education in a place like this. And so therefore, it would be foolish for us just to kind of just look at it as just a few bad apples. We would have seen recently on our televisions, we talked about Edson da Costa, what we saw in front of our eyes on television, Rashan Charles, murdered on our screen, on our television screen. So it's still going on. Anybody that knows anything about police restraint, they've violated every rule in the book, as they do with every kind of killing that they get through. And so within our campaign, yes, we make those demands, but it's also important to put it in a context. It's also important to look back at our 20 years. And within our 20 years, we have called for the more accountability of the police. Because that's been one of our other demands, our other change. Because I think most decent people would recognize if we've got a police force in our community, then they should be accountable to our community. And so we had at that time the Police Complaints Authority, in which we campaigned against, in which they got rid of. Then they brought in the IPCC, which was just another version of it, because very often when we make some small victories within our struggle, we go back to sleep. But the state doesn't sleep. And so what it does, it reorganizes itself to the point in which that now we've got a so-called independent commission that looks into deaths is still carrying out the same work. So we've got to keep up that pressure. My sister here made the point of Jean-Charles de Menezes. This is a young man. This is a young man going through, I come from South London, going through Stockwell Station. Orders given by Cressida Dick, the now Commissioner of the Metropolitan Police. She ordered his execution. Police went on that train and they said in open inquest that, we told them we were police. The passengers on the train said no. They went on that train and they opened up their home gunfire as if it was like bonfire night or something. Wicked execution carried out. As I said, she was leading the terrorist team at that time. She's now the head of the police. So I say this to say that things are not getting any better. And it's more time than ever that we've got to recognize the importance of coming together. Very, very, very important. But in terms of the main thing we can learn, it seems to me from our experiences to recognize that until that this system here changes, then we should never ever expect to get any real justice.
Thank you. Anyone else from the panel?
I would just echo, I have to echo what my brother Minka said. I was going to say unity is strength. And I think, for me, the key thing is, when I think about Grenfell, as I said, I call it it's institutional terror. What we're dealing with is a systemic issue, and it's global. I think it's really important that you mentioned the global south. We've got a brother here from Kenya. We know the history of colonialism and what it's done on the African continent, what it's done in Kenya. We've got a brother here from Colombia. There's a whole history of how Africans in Colombia and other indigenous communities have been more or less annihilated. There is a genocidal program going on, and it's happening right here and it's happening right now. When we think about struggle, an important thing, and Minka has said it, I'm echoing it, is that we need to look at it in the wider context. Gentrification, as they like to call it, or regeneration, I call that socio-ethnic cleansing. It is the same thing. What happened in Grenfell was a result of greed, local authority who hand in hand with developers set out to ethnically and socially cleanse an area for profit, which resulted in the murder of hundreds of people. And they knew this would happen because the Grenfell Action Group, for example, people that I'm quite close to, they had a blog, they consistently, since 2011, raised concerns about the fire. There were groups in the community that said we didn't want this school built and our sports centre redeveloped right at the foot of the tower because it would cause problems with access. They weren't listened to. They were women, single mothers, Muslim women actually living in that tower who raised concerns with the local authority, and they were threatened with legal action by white men in grey suits who live in Chelsea, in big houses and have country houses and many cars, and interestingly enough, have shares and controlling interest in development companies, the same development companies get the contract. So when we look at a situation like with UFFC, when we look at death in police custody, when we look at death in prisons, when we look at immigration officers raiding people and murdering them, it's all part of the same thing. Gentrification, socio-ethnic cleansing. What we need to do is we need to be unified in our fight back, and we need to see it as one struggle against a systemic form of racism, discrimination, and exploitation by a very small minority at the top, in whose interest it is to keep the people, the large majority at the bottom, fighting each other, disunified and weak and defenseless, so that when they come for one person over there, people think, well, that's nothing to do with me. It's important to realize when they come for one of us, they're coming for all of us. Right. And we used to say, an injury to one is an injury to all.
Yes. Very quickly. I just want to say, the report that Mika mentioned also said, and I saw this young man report about it.
You're talking about the Limey report?
Pardon?
The Limey report.
Yeah.
Yes.
What is that women, it's not about women, but black youth get a disproportionately higher sentence for offences that they may have committed which are smaller or lower than non-black criminal offenders get. So that is one thing to remember because of how the judiciary, and this is true of women as well, for minor offences, women also get a disproportionate sentence. It's very well established. The other very dangerous thing I just want to quickly mention is that this government has already got plans, and I don't know how far they have progressed with it, and it's been talked about since 2012-2013, that they have now sold off, outsourced prisons to Group 4 and Serco and companies like that, security companies. If you look at the history of Group 4, they control immigration act detention places, but also now they control our prisons. It's it's the biggest, it's the largest global security company in the world. It's merged with other security companies in Europe, and it has become the biggest, and it can be used by governments to do surveillance on refugees here. For instance, it can be used by people who are rebellious in this country, by other governments. Particularly, I'm talking about the Indian diaspora living in the West. And there are sections, the sections within the diaspora who are affluent and who, they organized a campaign, Hindus for Trump. And they celebrated when Trump won. And now we see a real axis emerging between the BJP in India, Israel and the US. Militarily, there's a military partnership. There is also a whole neoliberal. This is how politically and militarily the global project of neoliberalism ultimately, I think, eventually, plays out, because there is this kind of axis where today, I think Keval might enlighten me. Israel sells the largest amount of its weapon sales are to India today. And you know that Israel has globally, throughout, from the time I was a teenager, we have experienced, the state of Israel is the biggest peddler of state terror all over the world. Forget about everything else that they do, but they also, under the supervision, oversight and the aegis of the US and the CIA, they are the ones who sell counterinsurgency techniques, armory, training, the most. After the Cuban Revolution, what happened in the whole of South America, Latin America, all the different revolutionary situations, all those military juntas, one after the other in Latin America, they purchased counterinsurgency techniques and intelligence and all of that from Israel. And then of course they have sold that to my country as well, Sri Lanka, and they are in military partnership with India. So the state terror mechanics, the US of course commandeers Israel to do it, like the junior sub-agent of the US, that is one of the things that they do. So there is a real axis developing, and it is kind of right. Britain is not, Britain is also involved in this, of course, obviously, because that is why they keep talking about how they still want to be a country with influence on the global stage, because they don't want to give up their so basically, so this is what we are saying. And well, in India, I think, there is a huge, it's not something that came up suddenly. It started during the colonial period. It was always there, even within the anti-colonial movement, the kind of Hindu nationalism, which is Hindu majoritarianism. It was always there. And anti-colonial nationalism can also become, and it's not just in India, we have seen this in Africa, in so many countries, all the ethnic clashes between different ethnicities. This is the reality of the post-colonial world, where colonialism has driven and gerrymandering borders, arbitrarily drawing up borders, dividing people, dividing identities. Before colonialism there was greater syncretism in India, but during the whole colonial period the division started. And now, of course, through our post-independence, it grew and grew, and now it has culminated in the huge rise of majoritarianism, Hindu majoritarianism, which is now oppressing all minorities. And minorities means Muslims, Christians, Dalits. Dalits are the very oppressed caste, because you know about the caste system in India. So Muslims are at the moment the frontline targets, because there is the global, and India very happily embraced the global, the war on terror thinking and the logic of it, and the whole purpose of it, and has been targeting, and we have had the 2002 Gujarat massacres of Muslims, huge programs against the Muslim community in the state of Gujarat, when Narendra Modi, the current Prime Minister of India, was the Chief Minister at that time. Narendra Modi has great links with Indian corporate institutions, which are very well entrenched here as well. So all of this is really a frightening prospect, and even within the diaspora. And the one thing I want to talk about here very briefly, if you don't mind my saying this, is taking a bit of time, is that when we are talking about challenging the state, and I would say this is not just for South Asia, this is not just for India, because it's not just for India, but it has happened within my own tiny little Sri Lanka, also has a Sri Lankan Tamil diaspora here. And what it is that we must also, our struggles against the state will be more robust and meaningful only if we also struggle against simultaneously within our own communities, the power structures within our own communities of caste, clan, gender oppression. Unless we do that, we somehow lose the initiative to build a really formidable movement against the British state. Because ultimately, the power structures within our own communities are at another level linked to the powers of the state. You will see that. Look at the leaders of many African countries. They are all implicated in the whole neoliberal project. Or the leaders of our country, the ruling elites in our countries, in all our countries in the global south. They are like, pigs at the trough, basically. They are all implicated in the neoliberal project. And they have embraced it, and they militarize their societies at the behest of the US or Britain or whatever. And so this is something that, and we have elites, we have elites even within our communities here, who bring those kinds of the same stratifications. And for instance, one of the things that we as South Asian Solidarity Group are heavily involved in at the moment is the caste legislation. Do I have time to talk about this very briefly?
Just 1 minute. Keep it to 1 minute if you can. It is really important.
We have the caste system in India, which is a heinous apartheid system, and there are people at the bottom or pushed to the bottom who are called oppressed caste. They used to be called untouchables, and now they have chosen a name for themselves, in the sense they call themselves Dalits, a kind of an overarching term for all oppressed castes. Now, in Britain, in 2010, the Labour government introduced an amendment to the equality legislation, saying, because there are South Asian communities here, and they have carried all that baggage from there to this country, and they practice caste. They practice caste, they observe caste discrimination and exclusion exists even here. And there have been complaints about this. So, they included that in the equality legislation. And the Tory government, which is in cahoots with the upper caste elites of the South Asian community, a powerful elite section of the South Asians, who are involved with the BJP in India, who are sympathizers of the whole Hindutva movement. And the Tories have joined hands with them and decided not to implement this law. So there is a campaign against that. There was a consultation, and we are campaigning against that the caste legislation should form part of that. It is included. So this is a very typical example of how we realized. We have South Asian Solidarity Group has had an anti-racist political praxis for many, many years, but it cannot be done. We realized that unless we challenge gender oppression, caste, class, and other oppressions within our own communities. And it's a twin purpose thing, because all these oppressive structures are linked around the world.
Thank you. Minka wants to say a few words as well.
Yeah, I mean, I agree that when we're talking about our struggles, it's got to be anti-imperialist, it's got to be taking on the issues of race, got to look at the issue of women, got to look at the issue of class and people's orientation, of course. But before the question really is that how can we combat global fascist and Islamophobic violence affecting Muslims? And before I lose all of my friends, I think that I've got at this stage, let me just quickly remind people about our annual procession, which will be taking place. I was asked the question, well, what day in September is it? Sorry, in October, the last Saturday in October. And it will be the 28th. So we'll be meeting at Trafalgar Square on the 28th of October. And just to say, if I sound a little bit angry, I've got good reasons to be angry, because, you know, our communities experience absolute terror from the police, and it's important to really state that. You know, it's an everyday kind of experience that what we go through. But again, I just want to stress in regards to the campaign, before I touch on this fascism business, that, you know, we have been making some progress. And the Home Secretary, well, not the Home Secretary, well, she was Home Secretary at the time, Theresa May, has called an inquiry into deaths in custody. And one of the recommendations we're coming through is that all the families should be entitled by right to just get legal aid, because and this has been one of our demands of the campaign, is that, you know, families shouldn't have to have another campaign to get legal aid. All right, we're in a campaign for justice for your son or daughter, but we shouldn't have to be having another campaign for legal aid. And this seems to be now be recognized, although they're holding back on this report, but we'll wait and see when it comes out. I just want to just really stress to people on this annual procession. And also, one of the demands also coming out of the families. And the families are saying that, you know, these inquests that what we're going through is an absolute sham. It's a charade, it's an absolute joke. When your loved one get killed and they take you through, it's almost like, it's just a big joke. And so they're saying they're not really in favor of that system. And all they're simply saying is this, is that the police should be just treated as ordinary citizens. So that means where the evidence is, put them on trial. And I don't think that that's an unreasonable demand to kind of make. They're the one that's telling us that police are not above the law. So coming on to this fascism now, which is going to be a little bit contentious, tend to lose a lot of my friends on this one. But we're in a so-called place of learning, so this is a good place for us to have that discussion. I mean, I kind of have a lot of problems with this term fascism. And I say it because fascism as a term seems to come into prominence in our vocabulary from two main kind of experiences in the 20th century. We talk about Mussolini and we talk about Hitler. And what we find after the killing of 6 million Jews in Germany, which was an atrocity, it must be condemned, is that we now get this term being popularized called fascism. And I say that if we're going to combat globalized so-called fascism, then it seems to me we've got to really analyze our problem correctly. And I say correctly because when you look at the history of black and oppressed people, and I start from African people, we have an experience of over 100 million of us being killed during slavery. When we look at colonization, and before I come on colonization, and I'm going to be quick, but this is important, because you see, I don't talk to many mixed audience. because we've come to a point that, you know, it's almost like we're talking, but we're not talking. All right? And so as a result, I think it's important for us, if we're going to look at the world, we have to start looking at it through the eyes of the oppressed. Okay? And so when we look at slavery, we had Elizabeth I, John Hawkins, she commissioned a royal commission into slavery. We had other slave presidents like George Washington. We had, and here now we're talking about genocide. We had in the Congo, King Leopold, up to 10 million Congolese gets killed. Before Hitler came into power, we go back to the early German administration, Second and First Reich, we see the Herero people, genocide, concentration camp, no special term comes up around that. And I'm saying that one of the reasons why we get these special terms is because Hitler killed white people. And because he kills white people, now we now have got this concept in our mind that that must be the most wicked and terrible system. And I'm saying that we need to relook of how we are actually looking at the world. We have a brother there from Kenya. The British, Churchill, they talked about the sun never set on the British Empire, genocide. The empire was built on genocide. Yet, no word has actually been brought up to call Churchill this, Leopold this, Queen Elizabeth this. But we as African and oppressed people say that this was as wicked and as terrible and as genocidal as any other people's experience. And even today, we have a massacre in America, Las Vegas. And I hear news reports saying that, well, this is one of the most, 59 people gets killed. Terrible, terrible. This is one of the biggest massive killings of Americans in peacetime. But yet when you go back to the 1920s in Tulsa, what we call a Black Wall Street, over 300 African people get slaughtered. And so when people come up and talk about Black Lives Matter, it's no joke. And I'm saying that if we're going to correctly go forward, we need to stop looking at the world through white people's eyes, but looking at the world from the right way up, because that's the only way we're going to go forward. And when I say this, and I end on this, because there's white people that come into our movement with such slogans like black and white unite and fight. But really and truly they're saying black and white unite and fight from our perspective. Come and join us. And what we're saying is that if we're going to go forward, it's going to be on a basis of equality and truth. Because otherwise we're not going to get very far.
I want to say that those are absolutely on-point, excellent comments, Minka. I think one other thing that what was missing from the Las Vegas context is the deaths of so many indigenous people in the United States that was completely erased. That's always erased. No one remembers. People tend to forget that the United States is a settler colonial country, like Canada, like Israel, like New Zealand, like Australia, like South Africa, etc. So I will go into the next question. I think I want to really get Luis Carlos and Daniel as well to be involved in this question. So after Brexit, it has been migrant workers, such as Justice for LSE Cleaners or the SOAS Justice for Workers, among others, who have courageously fought against exploitation for all workers, not only migrant workers alone. This year was the 40th anniversary of the Grenfell strike, where migrant women of color, who were predominantly of South Asian origin, took to the streets to protest against the abysmal working conditions, such as the indignity of having to basically ask permission from all white management, male management, I have to say, to use a toilet. Can you consider this was 40 years ago? A woman had to ask for permission from her white superiors to go to use the toilet. While the Grenfell strikers were receiving enormous support from the trade unions and activists around the UK, the Trades Union Council, the TUC, that represented the Grenfell strikers, decided to withdraw their support for their campaign. As Josephine Desaya, one of the pivotal members of the Grenfell strike, commented, quote, "Trade union support is like honey on the elbow. You can smell it, you can feel it, but you cannot taste it," end quote. Another example of this is evident in the horrible treatment that migrant workers who created the Three Causes campaign to address the exploitation they face as outsourced workers at the University of London. Initially, the Three Causes campaign was supported by the union, which is Unison. However, it was later found that Unison had colluded with university managers to shut down the Three Causes campaign. We have seen the rise of independent and grassroots unions like the Independent Workers of Great Britain and the United Voices of the World Union, often led by precarious migrants themselves. What suggestions that you would give to other precarious migrants being exploited by their employers or betrayed by mainstream unions who do little to advocate for the plight of migrant workers? What are the key steps to ensure the success of a migrant workers' campaign against labor exploitation? Thank you.
Bueno, injusticias por todo lado y gracias por tus palabras.
Gracias.
Muy ilustrativas y muy significativas, de verdad. Injusticias por todo lado. Nuestro mundo es un mundo plagado por injusticia. La gente que ostenta el poder obviamente nunca va a hacer nada para deshacerse de ese poder. Obviamente se cometen todo tipo de atropellos e injusticias y lo que tiene que ver con la parte laboral, pues obviamente con mucha más razón. Uno de los derechos más violados son los derechos humanos y que tienen que ver con la parte laboral. Es importante señalar que un aspecto que podría y significaría el garantizar que las luchas sindicales no se pierdan o que las luchas sindicales lleguen a buen puerto es el empoderar al trabajador, en que el trabajador tenga la capacidad de tomar decisiones, porque muchas veces lo que sucede es que quien dirige un sindicato, quien ha asumido la posición de burócrata y quizás se ha aburguesado, no siente el feeling de lo que siente el trabajador, de lo que siente la persona que está sufriendo las iniquidades y las violaciones por parte de la empresa o por parte del jefe o del patrón.
Firstly, Luis Carlos wants to highlight there's injustices everywhere, and also in places of labor like SOAS, there's also injustices. Also, he wants to congratulate everyone on what everyone has been saying. Has been very empowering. He believes that one of the rights that are most broken or not respected are those of workers. And what happens is that, what he proposes is that at the center of these movements, it has to be the empowerment of the worker. Like the worker needs to be empowered, because these people empower the bureaucrats or people that so happen to be in these places of power where they manage workers. They have never experienced these precarious situations that workers have been in. Therefore, he believes that at the core of these movements, the workers have to empower themselves.
Y eso lo digo porque leyendo sobre lo de Grenfell o Tres Cosas Campaign, que quizás me tocó vivir, la garantía quizás que tenemos en SOAS es eso, es la posibilidad de que las decisiones que se vayan a tomar sean consultadas con los trabajadores, fundamentalmente. Es decir, no se toma ninguna decisión sin que el trabajador, que es el afectado directo, tome una decisión. A mí me parece que esa es una clave muy importante para que las luchas sindicales, para que todas las diferentes campañas en un momento determinado tengan buen éxito. Obviamente, todo implica conocimiento, reunión, constancia, consistencia, perseverancia, denunciar y efectivamente lo más importante para mí dentro de la acción sindical y dentro de la acción de la lucha es tomar acciones. De nada sirve elevar un statement o elevar una carta, una solicitud solicitando algo, cuando de pronto simplemente nos vamos a quedar en ese contexto, en el contexto de que yo te envío una carta, quizás no te respondo, quizás sí, pero la acción es importante, y no solamente desde el punto de vista de la lucha sindical, sino que la acción en todos y cada uno de las situaciones y de los problemas que aquí se han expresado y se han hablado. Es decir, hay que tomar acciones de cualquier tipo. Vuelvo y repito, es decir, yo soy de los que piensan que cuando no es posible entenderse con alguien porque no te entiende y porque no te quiere dar lo que te corresponde, hay que tomar acciones.
So he speaks of, from his perspective, that in SOAS at least they had the opportunity to lead, to partake in the making of decisions. And he believes that it's very important to put the work in that place where they can actively participate in something that involves their destiny. And he mentioned a lot of procedures that workers need to do to ensure that they are victorious in their fight. Is consistency, having regular meetings, organizing themselves, denouncing acts of abuse and exploitation, and more importantly is to take direct action, because it doesn't really matter and it's useless if you just want to demand something and you write a letter and then you give it to the person that's exploiting you and that's it. Like, you have to actively do these things, and not just exclusively in the cases of workers' unions. It has to be in every movement. That it has to be constant. Thank you.
Okay. The key step to ensure the success of a migrant worker campaign against labor exploitation is talking. I'll give an example. The campaign we did for justice for LSE cleaners, we started by talking. You talk to your colleague, and you talk to also people who are directly employed by LSE. Like when on the lift, I'll say, good morning, hello, how are you? And the other person will respond, and I'll say, oh, you start early today. And they'll say, yeah, I start from 6 to 6, and they'll go up. And you wonder, what do they expect for me to be working, or what are my working conditions? They are not aware what I was going through until I speak out and talk to them, and they start realizing these people, they must be going very hard time. So the key step is talking. You talk and you let people get aware of what's happening and what are your working conditions. The other thing is getting together with your colleagues. A lot of people at workplace, they are not organized. They are not in the union, or they don't want to join the union for one reason or the other. Example in LSE, we had a fair few people who are on Unite and a fair few people on Unison. But there is a case which came to LSE when they dismissed of 3 cleaners without notice or without pay. And after that, they came back, and they came back with a grassroots union, which is a United Voice of the World. And everybody was, oh, how did they make that? So they talked to us, and they gave us information and how they went and how they got successful to be returned back to work. And after that, a lot of cleaners get the curiosity, they want to join the union or whatever. So myself and another colleague, we took over, and we start going through and asking people, would you like to join a union? And when they said yes, we had some forms which they could fill on to join the union, to get you need to get in the union membership, and after we accumulated enough members, we start now talking to the general secretary of the union and to say we want to kick off our campaign, and then the campaign started. And then on this campaign we couldn't get it successful if we didn't have force behind us. And who are the force behind us? The force behind us were the students, who are very, very marvelous, and also the academic staff who've been talking to them, and they came to our plea to understand the working condition we are going through is very, very difficult one. So why the cleaners will not get themselves and say, oh, let's all we do this, because what we know, there are some obstacles. Some people, they're unlimited here to stay in United Kingdom, or they don't have valid document to start working, and that will make them to back out. They don't want to get involved with the campaign, or they don't want to get to the next step, and you wonder why they don't want to do this. If you look, the benefit we are going to get if we are successful, and what we are getting at this time is awful. The benefits were much higher, and you wonder why these people, they don't want to get to the campaign. So the key step here is try to explain to the few members who are willing to go, and then to get more force behind you, who are the students, member of community who can come to do your campaign, or when you started the campaign. With LSE Justice for Cleaners, I think the students have done a very marvelous job, because what they did, they start organizing for breakfast. Early morning, they'll come 6 in the morning when we start work, and then they organize the breakfast, they bring food, and the cleaner will come. After they finish their 2-hour shift in the morning, they'll get there and they talk about what is going on, and they'll feel this is great and this is a good idea. So then we carried on from there. And on the campaign time, it was difficult because, as it's saying here, the mainstream unions, like Unison or Unite, they are always working with the management or the school, and they didn't want this thing to be successful. So when the campaign was really going on, and we started the strike and things like that, one occasion when on the strike, what happened? The school called the police, and they came and surrounded all of us. And one of police came and approached me and asked me, what's this? And I asked him, why are you here? And they said, the school have called them because some people from nowhere, they have come to invade the school. So they didn't recognize us as workers there. They said these are people from nowhere. They just pop up here and just demonstrating and doing all these things, beating the drums and all that, which it was a lie. Because we've been talking for many months about the campaign, the strike and all this, but they all ignored. The Unison ignored. One of their members became ill, they didn't assist. One of their members became sick, they didn't assist. So we turned up to the grassroots union, which is United Voice of the World, and which made it very good campaign and to make us successful. So here you need to talk to the colleagues and tell them what the benefit and why they should do this, because it's their life. At the end of the day, they have nothing to lose. All what we are losing is our wages when we go on the strike. And the campaign was well organized, because the students, they organized the strike fund. They started crowdfunding for strike fund and things like that. So it gave us more support, because we didn't have to worry, I'm gonna lose a little bit pennies if I don't go for strike, and this is make you more courageous and you want to fight more. So what's that? So the suggestion I would give is to people to get unity, to get together, and the most important, talking. Because if you are working there with fear, feeling, oh, I don't have proper document to work here, I don't want to get involved with this. You need to talk, you need to let people know what is going on, and then things can roll on over. Thank you.
Thank you. I think for the last couple of minutes, we're going to leave it to the audience and have a Q&A to ask our distinguished panel questions that you might have, that have risen throughout these discussions. So I think we'll just give you them. You can take this mic. Anyone has questions? You're all very shy.
It's the last question that we prepared on different student movements and workers and student alliances have from Azania, South Africa, to the UK have taken up colonialism and how it still operates today in higher education institutions like SOAS, like University of Cape Town. And have used this analysis of colonialism as being a power that remains within these higher education spaces. Have used that analysis to challenge the institution. In South Africa, we saw the most radical section of the Feast Must Fall movement grow into the Outsourcing Must Fall movement, where they fought successfully against outsourcing at University of Cape Town. But also in other universities, such as the university currently known as Rhodes, or in the University of Western Cape, where again students and workers came together and they were met similarly to what happened at the LSE with the extreme amounts of, well, in South Africa there were extreme amounts of police violence on the University of Western Cape campus, and I guess my question is about these decolonial struggles. At SOAS, there's this decolonizing SOAS campaign. In other universities, there's campaigns such as why isn't my professor black, or why is my curriculum white? Just since we are in a university tonight, what are your takes on these campaigns? How do you see them, both historically from your experience, but also how do they, are they worth it? Is it worth trying to decolonize a university, or actually are we trying to just get rid of the university altogether? It's a big question. It's just sort of throwing out these movements and what's been going on around this, to see what you have to say on that.
Who would like to take that? Would you like anyone in the panel? Well, we'll start with Isis first, and then work our way.
Yeah, I think they're really important. I'm just coming to the end of doing a year myself as a student at Goldsmiths. And the first time round when I studied in the early 90s, it was at UCL, so I've been in this University of London for a while over the last 30 years. Yeah, I don't even use the word post-colonial, because I actually don't think we're in a post-colonial situation. I would prefer neo-colonial. Where I come from, we're still colonized in the Caribbean. We're not free. The sister here spoke about the situation in India and in Sri Lanka. I mean, it's a global issue coming back. It's kind of the issue of the control. It's economic, it's political. Now, knowledge is power, they say. You know, we throw these things out. Everyone has a right to pursue intellectual development, academia if they wish. Everybody's contribution is valid, whatever they choose. And if somebody chooses to engage in the academy, they should be able to do so in a situation that enables them to feel respected as human beings and to be able to be treated on or find themselves on a platform of equality. That is not possible in a colonized university with a colonized curriculum. So, for example, SOAS has a horrible history of colonization. I mean, it was set up, as most of you will know, to educate the white saviors to go and deal with the savages. You know, let's tell you what these Africans are like. Let's tell you about these Indians. So it has a horrible history of colonialization. Ivan van Sertima and Professor Tony Martin both went to SOAS. I believe it was those two. I definitely know of Van Serge, but he wrote his thesis on They Came Before Columbus, which looks at the African presence in the Americas prior to the arrival of Europeans, and in fact, it's the whole theory about their relationship with the indigenous people and them actually being indigenous to the Americas before enslavement. My ex-husband actually came to SOAS and did a degree in African Studies in 1992 or something, when my children were very young, or no, maybe a bit later. And on that syllabus in African Studies, there was no recommendation or recognition of African academics who espouse views that contradict notions of white supremacy and the notion that white people basically were the first to civilize and colonize everywhere. You know, that actually white people discovered America, that, you know. So if there is anything that deviates from this white supremacist, and a very fallacious white supremacist notion of world history, it is immediately rubbished, and it's removed from the curriculum, it's not accepted. So even, you know, sitting right here in SOAS, there's a real problem that an African academic who comes from an African-centric perspective is not accepted or not acceptable on the curriculum in a so-called School of Oriental and African Studies. So yeah, it's really, really valid. At the end of the day, for us to be able to thrive as people who are not European, not white European, we need to be able to be free to express ourselves without being censored, and we need to be able to articulate history as we see it. History is written by the victors, and until the lion tells his or her tale of the hunt will always be glorified by the hunter. And we, as non-white Europeans, have a right to tell our history and not have it disrespected in the way that it is in institutions. And I know for a fact that there are many young people that don't come from a white European background, that come from the global south, or even come from working class backgrounds, who don't want to come to university, A, because it's very elitist with the cost and everything, but also because they don't see anything reflected of themselves in the curriculum here. And they don't want to come and hear the white supremacist notion of world history, world politics, and world economics.
I think I want to just say a few words on this, because if we're looking at the Why Is My Curriculum White campaign, that was actually started 2 years ago at UCL. And the person who began this conversation was a person by the name of Dr. Nathaniel Coleman. Now, Dr. Nathaniel Coleman does not go by that name because he sees it as a name that was given by colonizers. He does not recognize his name. But he was very instrumental in creating this conversation at UCL. And what he wanted to do was create an MA program that looked at UCL's history of Eurocentric curriculum, but also of promoting genocide and white supremacy. And because of this, he was fired from his position. This was 2 years ago. So when we talk about these type of things, it's a continual process. You can't just look at it and think, oh, but that's an isolated incident. No, it isn't. I mean, Minka spoke eloquently about the schools to prison system in this country, not just in this country, but in the United States, and even in Canada and other places as well. Now, if you look at the attainment rate of Black, minority, ethnic students in any university system in this country, you'd be hard-pressed to find many that pass. You are excluded constantly. It's academic hazing in the first order, but it's tied to white supremacy. It is tied to excluding voices that critically intervene to expose the system. They don't want that, they don't like it, and they see you as enemy number one, and they want to exclude you. This is why when you see academics of color who also are in higher education, very few actually don't toe the state line or don't toe the management line. Many have co-opted themselves into it just to survive, but they co-opt nonetheless. And it makes the job of those who are trying to basically eradicate these structures very hard, very difficult. And I just want to end on that point. I think Minka wants to say a few words.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say very much on it, just to say that, I mean, I can't, well, let me deal with the point the brother raised. He raised the point about decolonizing these institutions, whether it be in South Africa, whether it's here. And I think it just reminds me of of our campaign around deaths in custody. And what I've said is that you can make your limited changes, but if you don't really target the source of that problem, then it's just a matter of time before it comes back. And I really do think in a place like South Africa, yes, we must talk about these changes, and we must take away all of these old, really barbaric individuals as from any places of prominence. But at the same time, the biggest struggle in South Africa is these really low down traitors who are really pushing our people back in such a state of misery. I don't know how we can separate that from actually changing that system which is there. And I think this is a message for white progressive people, is that we need to be careful when we start talking about black representation, because I think whilst it is important that black people should be represented, the root of it really is that we want a real just society, and we must have people in place in which that really about progressiveness, and not just because, well, all right, they're black. Because we call for things like changes, like black history into the curriculum, but without a movement outside, then they will give you black history. They will tell you that it was just slavery. They will just tell you that it's just about Martin Luther King. And so we can't separate these changes from an independent movement within our community. And I know it may seem that, we're just looking for simple changes, but it's not really gonna go like that. And up until we have it, I'm not saying that in a place like when we touched upon on fascism and people talked about Trump, this is very real. We've had an individual like Barack Obama. And the fact is that the truth be told, that black people's progress has actually regressed under him. It's not to say that we wanted a Bush, but the issue is that we must have our own independent program, put in our clear demands, and it's not just about these black faces, because we can see that around the world right now. So yes, we must strive to decolonize these institutions, their minds as it were. But it can't be separated from changing the society outside.
Thank you. Luis Carlos?
Yeah, I agree in one aspect. Estoy de acuerdo en un aspecto. La verdad no me gusta el término de colonización, no me gusta. Porque me parece que no es real, me parece que es algo que no entraña lo que realmente debería ser un proceso de decolonización, si físicamente es posible.
He was saying that he really struggles with the concept of decolonization. He doesn't really like the concept because it doesn't really encompass what decolonization really is. So he really wonders what decolonization even means, if it can be even physically possible or even for it to be implemented realistically.
Sí creo en la posibilidad de hacer unas reformas muy profundas y estructurales al sistema que empoderen quizás a las minorías, quizás a la gente negra en un momento determinado, pero decolonizar, a ver, ella decía, no hablamos de poscolonia, es decir, seguimos viviendo y existiendo en un mundo colonizador. Estamos colonizados en todos los aspectos. No nos sentimos libres en muchas partes del mundo. Eso no existe. Ahora, devolverle lo que nos han quitado, devolvernos la posibilidad del pensamiento, de nuestra idiosincrasia, de nuestra cultura, eso es imposible. Porque seguimos actuando y pensando con la mentalidad del blanco, porque es quien nos enseña en un momento determinado. En Sudáfrica, en Cape Town, es la posición. No podemos hablar de descolonización cuando seguimos recibiendo las teorías de todos los pensadores blancos, que quizás en un momento determinado socavaron a una población. Entonces, hablar de descolonización no me parece que sea algo que tenga un sentido real. Ahora, respecto de SOAS, es que aquí en SOAS piensan que descolonizar es poner a una mujer negra en la dirección de SOAS. No. Perdón,
So he believes that there could be like the possibility to maybe implement reforms, deep reforms, to truly change the structures that are put in place, maybe to empower, for example, black communities. But we're talking here about returning to a state that is so far back. Like, how do we even unlearn these behaviors that are being put in place for people of color and other communities? So we're talking about regressing and maybe traveling through time. So in the case of SOAS, for example, like the bar is so low, it's just having like black people in position of power, but that's not what it means. It has to go way deeper, because we have people, we just regurgitate information from these academics that we believe true, that at one point they could also have partaken in the oppression of our community. So how do we even start to unlearn and rebuild all these structures?
En SOAS enseñamos la historia africana, enseñamos una cantidad de situaciones que tienen que ver con Asia, pero quienes enseñan son blancos. Es decir, no quiero herirse sus debilidades, pero es la verdad. La población de profesores en SOAS negros o asiáticos es mínima. Y así queremos decolonizar algo cuando estamos obedeciendo el mismo pensamiento y la misma estructura mental. No, para mí eso es un imposible. Y creo que es la misma conclusión a la cual un grupo de estudiantes en Cape Town ha llegado, de que resulta imposible hablar en esos términos de decolonización. Ahora, un aspecto que quiero resaltar es, he estado investigando y he estado mirando con una persona en relación con esto. Es decir, cuando un estudiante negro entra a SOAS con sus notas y un estudiante blanco entra a SOAS con sus notas, en el transcurrir del tiempo, cuando terminan sus carreras, el porcentaje de evaluación mejor es la del blanco, pero no la del negro. Pero es precisamente por eso, porque estamos tergiversando y estamos enseñando algo que quizás no nos corresponde, o que quizás deberíamos de darle la posibilidad a alguien que realmente conozca la cultura, que realmente sienta como siente, por decir algo, el africano, para efectos de que se pueda hablar en esos términos. De lo contrario, no estaríamos hablando de nada. Perdona. Y gracias.
So he's speaking about, specifically in the case of SOAS, that in SOAS they teach about Asia and Africa, but they do this in a way that is all done through the white gaze. So it's about having people teach these things that have no place in teaching them. And that's why he was saying that in the case of some students in Cape Town, they truly believe that there's really no language right now to be able to be dealing with concepts like decolonization, because the narrative, there's simply no words to be able to tackle the issue. And it's just that he believes that there's really no point right now when it's also whitewashed. Though it is important to resist, as he said before previously, with reforms, but right now the way that we're tackling the subject is already skewed with white supremacy. Thank you.
We have a question here.
I want to thank the organisers and the panel for their insights and empowering statements. It's been a long night, I'm kind of tired, so forgive me if I don't articulate my questions as well as I want. I think the last question ties in nicely to what I would like to ask. For any struggle, people need vision to give them motivation and focus. And it appears to me, while we're talking about history, it appears to me that historic justice can only come when African nations unite and invade Europe and do to them what the Belgians did in Congo. And it appears to me that this is a question on moral philosophy and history, and it's something thrown in the hypothetical, I wish to stress. And it appears to me, sorry, rather, one can argue that the truly post-colonial is when the formerly colonized colonize the colonizers. That's my question, hypothetically, philosophy.
Any answers to that?
I would like to answer that. Also talk about what I mean, Luis Carlos, yeah. I think Luis Carlos raised a very interesting point, which I want to develop a bit further, about looking at it in a counterfactual manner. 500 years ago, or 600 years ago, as far as the world was concerned, Europe was maybe in the backwaters, you know, and then comes colonial capitalism, and they conquer the world, Europeans, and today we have systems, political systems. Just look at the concept of the nation state, the nation. Why is India a nation, or Sri Lanka a nation, or Nigeria a nation? The nation state, borders, everything else, democracy as liberal democracy. I'm talking about liberal democracy. I'm a great believer in democracy, but not this kind of liberal democratic structures. And so all of this has been bequeathed to us, bestowed upon us by colonial capitalism. And I want to say, I mean, I also want to reference your question here. I want to link it to this. The thing is, racism was an ideology, in my opinion. Racism, white supremacy, that accompanied the capitalist journey. And what was different, for instance, if we take India, what was different from, you know, when the Mughals came to India, and when the British and the Dutch and the Portuguese came to India, to Sri Lanka, all three of them came, is that capitalism, by its sheer magnitude, the size, the quantum of how it impacted, it made such deep-seated systemic changes to the way these societies were functioning and the way in which these societies were developing, you know. And all these societies had their own trajectories of economic development, historical development, and political development. Everything then was changed and mutated to support the global capitalist endeavor. And even today, when you're talking about Africans coming, African nations uniting and coming here, you are forgetting the fact they are all, the ruling elites of all these African nations are fully implicated in the global neoliberal project. They are, and it is, we are looking at a counterfactual question when you're talking, I think that is what Luis Carlos is confused by, that, you know, what are you talking about? Decolonization, okay? Yes, I mean, you know, there is I agree with what ISIS raised in the sense that it is really not post-colonial, it is maybe neo-colonial. I remember in the 80s, before I came to this country, we always talked about neo-colonialism, the continuing. But when I came here, I suddenly found that post-colonialism had become very fashionable. So, you know, we have everything has been, so we have now, for 300, 400 years, we have been thinking. All the systems have been changed. We have the first past the post system in our countries, you know, which have been terrible, which have completely screwed up all the ethnic conflicts we have had. Not just in South Asia, but in Africa as well. Everywhere. Every time there's an election, there is a bloody pogrom or a massacre or an ethnic riot, you know, that sort of thing. So we have inherited all of this. Now, we have to go back to the drawing board. It cannot happen here. It cannot happen in the metropolis. It has to happen in our countries, back home. People have to and they have to think of different ways of, in Sri Lanka today there's a whole constitutional debate going on. How do ethnicities learn to live together? And there's a huge discussion about that. And of course the tired old, the Swiss model, the Swedish model, the Irish peace process, everything is brought there and tabled. I said, forget about all these things. Let's just talk to people and say, so there are lots of things have to happen there. And I just have one little practical peeve I want to share with you, and I want to shut up after that. When I came to this country 30 years ago, I was shocked at the ignorance, the sheer ignorance of the general population, including school students, of British history. Because one half of British history of modern Britain is colonial history. It is never taught. Okay, in the US, it's badly taught. But the black community has struggled so hard and fought for it, really fought for it, that at least they know that even white children learn about slavery and what happened, and the underground, the black underground railway to the north. I mean, I know that because I know white children who live there and who are learning about these things. In this country, in the schools, it's abysmal ignorance. You cannot read Jane Austen without understanding colonialism, because there is always that great hero who comes. He had sought his fortune. He had gone abroad and sought his fortune. And I used to think, how did he seek his fortune? Of course, he came and looted and plundered in our countries. So, school children are completely ignorant. No, this is very important. If we want to challenge white supremacy, not all white people are not enemies. But because the kids going to school now, today, are not the people who oppressed black people in Africa or Indians or whatever, but they have to know their history to objectively take it and look at it, and this is what happened. So we can talk intelligibly to each other. And that is something we must all campaign for. Because I just want one last point, Sanas, please. In our campaign, in South Asian Solidarity Group, we have lots of grey-haired people there. But we also are constantly trying to attract young South Asians into our group. And we find that they also, because they have been through the school system here, they know a lot about Indian culture, which is a lot of bullshit, basically. But they don't know anything about the colonial history, or very little, too little. It's not enough for us to engage, so there's lots of things about how to cook this food and how to dress that thing and how to do that festival and how to go to the temple and do this or that, but not about Jallianwala Bagh, not about the Bengal famine where 4 million people were killed. And Churchill said, oh, these Indians, let them die, they are a beastly race anyway. So this is very important. So we must think about this, otherwise we can't have a conversation about white supremacy.
Yeah, boy, I did say when I come into this place, this is supposed to be a place of learning. My gosh, whoa. Well, first of all, let me just say, I don't unite with this term white supremacy. The white man is not supreme, and I don't look at him in that way. We shouldn't disempower ourselves by using those terms. And if we really look at the reality of the world today, he's on the defensive. And the only thing that's holding him up is Uncle Tom, right? And the Aunt Jemimas of this world. So when I hear my brother, God, saying that African should come together and do what to Europe, there's certain, what sickens me so much about our resistance today is that we fought so hard in our resistance against imperialism nationally and internationally. And when we see these leaders come into place, that there's some people in the Caribbean and there's certain people in Africa who are saying that their condition is actually now worse under neo-colonialism than it was when direct colonialism was there. Now, I'm not uniting with that. But what I'm saying is that we can't let these traitors off the hook. They got nothing whatsoever in common with ordinary working people. What they're doing is absolutely criminal. And so, no, and this is the point I'm making about going forward. If we're going to go forward, we've got to clarify the struggle in which that what we're dealing with. And we're against injustice. We're against injustice. And this idea that these traitors, which are stooges, are going to play any part with this. No, what you should be saying is that these stooges should be overthrown, locked up, and the keys thrown away.
So can I stress, when I said nations, I'm not talking about formal nations today, I mean people.
Well, we don't even, you see, we can't have the mindset that we're going to be just in this eternal struggle. We've got to get to a point in which we have a just system in when people can live decently amongst themselves. We've got to have that as a vision, or otherwise life looks pretty terrible. Gosh. And I can say, in my 35 years in my study of history, I say working people are going forward. You may not want to recognize it, but life in Britain for black people 60 years ago and globally and for ordinary working people is not the same. There's a lot more work to be done, don't get me wrong, but we're moving forward. And I'm saying is that we've got to draw a line as Malcolm X draws the line, particularly when he talks about black people, when he talks about the house Negro and the field Negro. We've got to be clear that the house Negro has got nothing in common with the masses of our people. They're used against us. So we don't want there's no talk about any ordinary working people in Africa going anywhere apart from building a progressive and equal nation. So we really need to dispel that, because right there we're kind of imbibing this kind of idea that somehow, you know, we've got this natural kind of urge to be against each other, to be fighting each other. No. When you get involved in struggle, serious struggle, then you're going to see people from all walks of life, because they're united around that one demand, which is for justice. So please do not bring anybody that want to go and inflict any, I don't know how far you're going to go back. Because people in Canada injustices for a long time, right? You know, we have got to be saying that they don't represent progress, and what we're fighting against is completely against that. We don't want to put their wickedness on anybody, all right? We want to struggle for a just society so that we don't have to be carrying out all of this terrible resistance in which that we're going through. So I want to reject the idea of and I don't know if it was meant as a joke, but if it was, it wasn't a good one, all right?
I think we're going to end on that note. We could probably be here for a couple of hours, I imagine, because the momentum is there. But I definitely want to thank this distinguished panel for being here tonight, for sharing your wisdom. And before, I think Minka wants to make an announcement, but we had to be very quick. We're leaving the building. Okay, Minka, you go first.
Yeah, please. As I said, I'm going to end as I begin. Just remind everybody that the United Friends and Families campaign, we have our annual remembrance processions for justice, and it takes place at the last Saturday in October of every year. We've been doing it for 20 years now. It starts at 12 o'clock at Trafalgar Square, very short procession, and we go down to Trafalgar Square to end in a petition. And just another quick announcement, which is that I know many people has come to this meeting is saying, well, what can I do? Gosh, everything sounds so terrible. Okay, so we're also involved in a community campaign called the London Campaign Against Police and State Violence. And we urge people, I've got some flyers and information down here, I know people are fighting against the rainforest, I know, but it's online as well, but we've got some basic information here for you, in which you can get involved, because by getting involved, we can bring about a change. And when I say get involved, this is open to all nationalities, by the way. Okay? So information is there. Please make the most of meetings like this. We don't just come here because we've got nothing better to do on a Friday night. we really want to see some changes, right? So you need to kind of see yourself as part of that process. Thank you.
Oh, I thank Binka for those words, because I'm going to express the same sentiments. South Asia Solidarity Group is organizing a meeting on the 24th of October here at SOAS somewhere, isn't it, South?
Yes. No, it's near Holborn.
It's near Holborn, right?
Yeah,
this is about Gauri Lankesh, a fearless critic, a woman journalist in Karnataka who was assassinated last month in front of her home by, we think, a Hindu fascist assassinating group.
We know.
Probably, pardon?
We know definitely.
We know definitely. And they have murdered other critics of the Hindutva, the Modi government as well. And also there's been a long string of journalists who are now, since Gauri's murder, there have been other journalists also who have been murdered. And there's a real targeting. You know that in India at the moment there are these mob lynchings of Muslims and Dalits by these Hindutva gangs. And now that is going on, unabated. And on top of that, now they are really targeting a campaign of, targeting public intellectuals like Gauri Lankesh. There is Tiesta Sentalwad who did a big expose and work on the Gujarat programs, etc., all of this. So this is going on to silence critics, intellectuals, activists, so on and so forth, human rights defenders. So please come to the meeting if you can. And South Asia Solidarity Group website, if you go there, you will get the details. It's South Asia Solidarity Group.
Just really quickly, I mentioned I'm a member of the Global African Congress UK. We are supporting a campaign that's going to be launched here at SOAS on the 19th of October at 7 p.m. And it's to support a young brother by the name of Asim Omer. It's a student activist from Sudan. As you know, there's conflict between, again, a lot of genocide and ethnic cleansing happening between North and South Sudan, and again, coming back to this whole thing about neo-colonialism and borders, etc. And the young man is being framed by police, is now on death row for allegedly killing a police officer, which is not the case. And we obviously, as a GAC, we are supporting these a Sudanese group to bring forward this issue. So 19th of October here at SOAS, 7 to 9 p.m. And I believe it's one of the lecture theatres right at the front. But you will be able to get the information on the night, and I'm sure the information will be put up through the student union and around the place before that.
So 19th, 24th, and Vinka's demonstration of the last
Busy month. Yes, busy month. Again,
just from this panel. Yeah.
Again, thank you so much, everyone. Thank you again to the participants. Again, have a lovely evening. Thank you.